Who knew there was a sequel already in production? That was Ted Cruz moments ago addressing the Texas Republican delegation here in Cleveland, and that came after the Texas senator's speech last night in which he failed to endorse the Republican nominee, Donald Trump.
To protect our God-given rights, even of those with whom we don't agree. So that
as you can hear there, the crowd took issue and thus booed Cruz off the stage. He and his wife Heidi, in fact, required security just to leave the building. And this was just the latest of controversies that have brewed at this week's Republican National Convention. To discuss it all, politics reporter for the Daily Beast, Betsy Woodruff, is with me right now alongside CBSN political contributor and former communications director for Mike Huckabee, Hogan Gidley. Betsy, there was a remarkable scene last night, arguably one we would be discussing, if not then, again, for the appearance we just saw from Ted Cruz at a delegation breakfast at which he doubled down to beat that dead horse yet again, but doubled down on his comments last night, saying that he's sorry if it offends anybody that he is saying to vote your conscience, but that's what he believes. But he took questions as well from the Texas delegation, and you could see the rancor within the delegation now. It was a snapshot, perhaps, of the election cycle we've seen, and certainly last night.
Absolutely, and his favorability numbers back in Texas have gone down since he wrapped up his presidential campaign. The reality is, yes, Texas Republicans historically over the last few years have really liked Ted Cruz, but they also like Trump, and they don't like seeing him with these insinuations that you can still be a good person and not back Trump. I think the really important thing, what stood out to me from this morning, is Cruz making the case that he's made before, that he gets a pass out of the pledge that he took in the first debate because Trump made it personal and Trump criticized his father and his wife. But Trump has made it personal for every Republican candidate. He suggested Ben Carson might be a child molester. He tells Chris Christie, now that they're campaigning together, that he needs to lay off the Oreos. I mean, I think if you're a viewer watching this election, what Trump has done to criticize Cruz does not look that different than what he's done for any other candidate. Trump's saying Hillary should be in jail. I think a lot of folks are going to hear the get out of pledge free card that Cruz is trying to use and just not be persuaded.
And we've pointed out just this week, Ted Cruz also called Donald Trump a serial philanderer, among other things, in response to that. And there is I know you are, but what am I? Playground quality here. Hogan, interestingly about this pledge, it was a pledge repeatedly referred to by certain delegates today as they questioned the Texas senator, and one man rather plaintively was trying to parse his own question, saying, I'm not asking you to support Donald Trump. I am, though, asking you to support the GOP. And I find it, again, interesting, this pledge that everybody refers to, we actually have to remember as though it were an ancient pledge taken eons ago. It was enacted essentially to make sure that when Donald Trump washed out, that he wouldn't be lobbing grenades into this thing from the side or running a third-party campaign of his own.
Right, and when I received the pledge from the RNC, because I was working for Mike Huckabee at the time, I received the pledge, and I went back and looked last night. I missed the asterisk where it said, if the campaign gets nasty, this pledge is null and void. I looked on both sides. I thought maybe they would have put it in small print or at the bottom. And let's not forget, even Donald Trump has come out and said, Ted Cruz, good guy, good guy. We like Ted Cruz. So even he, the target of so many nasty Ted Cruz attacks, has changed his tune as well in efforts to unify the party. The problem with this comment last night, and I was down there on the floor, we were all in the building, when he said vote your conscience, see, that's code, because he used it on the stump when he was basically telling people, listen, look inside your heart, look at your conscience, and you know Trump is wrong. I'm the right choice. So that was code, a dog whistle, if you will. Everyone heard it. And what's interesting, the irony of the word conscience, well, wouldn't your conscience tell you to keep a pledge that you signed? And so it just completely eroded just on that notion that you should vote your conscience, because people remember that from the campaign. They remember him saying that as a way to try and destroy Donald Trump. That's what took it down so quickly.
Betsy, I want to ask you, too, then about the political miscalculation. If a lot of people believed before the speech, certainly, that this was going to be kicking off Ted Cruz 2020, and that we had heard that he was not going to endorse Donald Trump. It was actually, he spoke today and said he spoke to Trump 3 days ago and told him, I am not going to endorse you. So everybody knew the game here. The Trump campaign had seen the speech hours before. They knew what was going to happen. Bob Schieffer was out here saying, and the Trump campaign let him walk into an ambush. I wonder, do you think Ted Cruz was surprised then by the response that those 3 words, vote your conscience, brought out of a room that to that point, roughly 90% of the way through that speech, he had?
I think probably. I think Cruz is always surprised when people don't like him as much as he expects them to.
Really?
Yeah, the vote your conscience code is really important here. Vote your conscience is code for vote for Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
That's what the people in that room heard. That's what it sounded like. That said, I mean, being on the floor, as you were, the reaction was really, really strong.
Yeah.
I was over near the Iowa delegation. I talked about it with Steve King, longtime Cruz backer afterwards, and he said he had trouble hearing by the last minute of Cruz's speech because it was so loud.
It's interesting.
He actually couldn't make out what he was saying.
I mean, in watching this back on an endless loop, this is my first convention, but I've been in a lot of very angry sports arenas. I've never heard booing like that. I mean, there is no television replay of the moment that will actually do it justice as it really was in this building.
But who are your sports teams? You're clearly not an SEC fan because it gets much louder and nastier than that.
I've been at Philadelphia Eagles playoff
that's
games.
Pretty bad. Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Let me tell you,
I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
But Hogan, party unity. It is something I almost feel like we've all felt like we need to discuss. If only because when Donald Trump named Mike Pence as his running mate, he paid lip service to it. Can we let go of this fanciful notion that is ever going to happen?
Well, look, the campaign itself, I mean, Manafort came out and said the Trump train's leaving the station. You're either on it or you're not. So the notion of unity per se is gone. I mean, it never really existed in the sense that we would think Trump would go into the back rooms and meet with these candidates and meet with these consultants and say, look, donors, listen, I'm the guy, let's work together. Mm-hmm. He doesn't do that. Mm-hmm. He basically said, get with me or get out of my way. So there's been kind of a messaging problem with the campaign on that sense because they're talking about unity. But, of course, Manafort's not articulating unity as the issue here. But, as I've said before, I don't think Trump's the one to go do the unification in hand-to-hand conversation. Where he unifies is with the message, under the banner, the broad banner of Hillary Clinton, under the broad banner of making America great again, the broad banner of Republican principles. If he can articulate that tonight, that's where I think this convention, everything else will be forgotten. If he comes out and does that, that's where the unifying message comes.
But there have been 3 nights now of lip service to the ideas of themes of the night. We're 0 for 3.
But not
really,
from him.
on the themes.
But not from him.
Yes, but in speaking to folks all week, folks like yourselves, for months and months, we always arrive, it seems, at the same place. This is a zero-sum notion. This is a contest to make this a referendum about one or the other. And about whom it is will lose come November. Would you be more surprised than Betsy to hear some forward-thinking, policy-based speechifying from the nominee tonight? I
don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty safe bet we're not going to hear any extreme wonkiness coming from Trump. That said, look, the Republican Party has been really divided on very acute lines for a long time, right? This isn't something new. It's not like Trump parachuted in and all of a sudden people were getting along and he's like, never mind, we're going to, sow seeds of division. This is how it's been going back for quite some time now. I remember the government shutdown in 2013 when Republicans were scratching each other's eyeballs out because they disagreed so strongly on so many of these key issues. It's not new. That said, Trump has become a vehicle for a sector of the Republican Party that didn't previously have this focal point, this icon that they could rally behind. And if it wasn't Trump, I think in the next cycle, it's going to be somebody else who takes up that mantle. That said, I think it's really important to remember how much Trump has sort of capitalized on and fed this anti-Cruz rancor. I mean, last night, the fact that Trump walked into the arena in the middle or towards the very end of Ted Cruz's speech.
As the last booze, as the booze began raining down, he appeared.
Yeah, it was, I think that's just one of the craziest moments we've seen at a convention. We might see at a convention in our lifetime.
Absolutely.
Right?
And think about this. Each day, there's been a certain theme and a big, keynote speaker the first night, Melania. And then the next day, we're talking about plagiarism. We're not talking about, or Joni Ernst's bad position within the program. Here we have the vice presidential pick, the stabilizing factor on the ticket, the policy wonk, the doer, if you will, the one who knows what it takes to actually govern. And we're not mentioning Pence at all. He gave an amazing speech, and he's not a rally guy. He's not a rah-rah guy. He was funny. He was engaging. He was warm. Amazingly, took great command of the room, and we're not talking about that. We're talking about a guy who it's like each day we've got drama to deal with as opposed to the actual message of the convention.
Well, then it does beg something of a meta question. Has this then really proven to be something rancorous and crazy like a fox of a campaign, which is to say, I mean, you just talked about the Trump campaign has tapped into this part of the party, but aren't we perhaps now seeing, and wasn't perhaps the ultimate political miscalculation by Ted Cruz last night, doesn't it speak to the idea that the alpha has changed, that it's now the Trump party, and that to unify, it's not about unifying something else, it is now, officially. The train, you can hear the whistle is sounding, the steam is pouring, and the conductors are waving. People are running through the turnstiles to make the leap. Is that where we are?
I mean, how many times has Paul Ryan been on stage so far in this convention? At least twice, right? The reality is, when you're the Speaker of the House and your candidate is in charge and you show up, Cruz is an afterthought. Right? Cruz's supporters are all going to be voting for Trump. He knew that. That's why he tweeted out a couple of months ago, I think Donald Trump's terrific. We're not going to be in a cage match. Everyone knows, look, Trump's the nominee. The voters here, the Republicans who voted in the primary, are going to be super loyal to him. And he's reshaping the Republican Party in ways that are going to have ramifications going forward for years.
And the beauty of it is we don't know what the ramifications are. I was meeting with some potential clients last week, and they were saying, where does the electorate go after this? And I'm like, I don't know. Because if he wins, do we keep these new voters in the party? Do they shrink back into the shadows? If he loses, do they stay with the Republican Party? Do they shrink back in the shadows? We don't know how this permanently, if at all, changes the landscape of Republican politics. I mean, ever. We don't know what it's going to do. We don't know where it's going to land. And that's what's so fascinating to me as a political strategist is we see where the numbers are now. We see where the polling is taking us with the anger and the vitriol with government and all that. That's never really probably going to die down. But did those folks rally behind a particular party? Do they just disappear? It's just fascinating. I mean, nobody knows.
It makes a very fair question. A report suggested that George W. Bush asked rather semi-rhetorically to his own aides, I wonder if I'm going to be the last Republican president. It's fair to say we have no idea what we'll be talking about tomorrow, but Betsy and Hogan, whatever it is, I'm sure it's going to be remarkable. Betsy Woodruff, we really appreciate the time this morning. Hogan, you're shackled. We'll see you. We'll see you here early.
I'm not going anywhere.
All right.